name is Lydia Kostopoulos, and I'm a strategy and emerging technologies advisor with a deep passion for body data tracking and human performance. This set of healthy aging protocol interviews delves into perimenopause, specifically the perimenopause game plan. Such an important life event that women experience requires a game plan, is my thought. And so in this series, I'll be interviewing people to ask them, what is their game plan? How are they going through it? How are they preparing for it? How are they posturing for it? I hope you enjoy these set of interviews. Hi, Perry. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about your perimenopause game plan. But first, let's do a little bit of an introduction. If you could please introduce yourself.
Sure. It's lovely to be with you again, Lydia. My name's Perry Brubaker. I'm traditionally trained as a physical therapist. I now do what's called population health management. So basically, I help groups of people turn towards better health. And so that's really where my background is and what I do every day.
Thank you. And so what is your healthy aging protocol?
I think I've told you this before, Lydia, when we spoke earlier, but I realized that the hormonal transition in midlife is an opportunity for women. And I think when my hormones started to transition, whether you want to call that pre-menopause or perimenopause, just that really kind of rough water time, I took it on as an opportunity because at the time, and it started for me 10 years ago, I'm in my 11th year of transitioning, there wasn't any options. Like, we have all this information now about, perimenopause and menopause and treating it and hormone therapy. They've looked at the studies, which I think is great. But 10 years ago, they weren't even talking about it. So when I would go to physicians to try to have kind of a professional conversation, since I'm a trained healthcare practitioner, I wasn't getting the answers that I needed. And so what I decided to do at that time is really dive into what better health is. And so I got a certification from the Academy of Prevention Health Promotion Therapies. It's geared towards therapists and conservative care providers. And it taught me a system that was designed and developed by a company out of New Jersey called Proactivity. And it's called the 5 Health Elements. Now, I was learning it for myself, but I was also learning it for patients that I was seeing, because at the time I was still seeing traditional physical therapy patients. And so what I found is those health elements: move, fuel, recover, endure, and connect work in a system. And depending on where you are in your life, like what season you're in and what environment you're occupying, you can manipulate those elements to make you feel successful. And so that's kind of how I approach health now. And in a wicked way, the hormonal transition aided me in that direction.
Wow. And so just to recap the 5 elements of health. So I remember at the inner circle, it's the fuel and the move and the recovery, right? And then as you go out, you've got the endure
and connect. Yeah. So if you think of it kind of as a bullseye, most people only focus on their movement, like their physical activity, and their fueling, which they interpret as a diet, whatever the latest diet is. And then recovery, most people understand through like recovery from a big workout, but it's really sleep, and movement recovery and stress recovery. And then endure is your stress management. And then connect is your connection to yourself, connection to others, and then connection to something larger than yourself, whether that be a spiritual practice, a specific religion, or a meditative practice. So those, yes, that's what the 5 elements are.
And you said that going through perimenopause and that this hormonal transition helped you kind of better embrace it. How so?
Um, what I learned is what you learn from medicine and wellness early in life doesn't really apply when you get to midlife. So sometimes you actually need to focus more on how you're fueling your body. I don't want to say a diet. The goal is not
Mm-hmm.
to really lose weight. The goal is to decrease the inflammation state in your body. And you
Mm-hmm.
actually need to decrease what you've been taught about exercise. So you may be doing too much intensity. And then
Mm-hmm.
the societal idea of push through, like you don't need sleep, work all hours, also goes to crap at that
Mm-hmm.
time. And then you have to really look at how are you coping? Like a lot of women cope through exercise, and they're actually doing too much exercise, too intense of an exercise for what they need to be doing. And so you really have to look at your coping mechanisms. A lot of people in midlife start to drink more as a coping mechanism. And then a lot of people disconnect from their friendships because they're kind of in the climb part of their jobs. They're succeeding. They know a little bit more than the younger people in their workplaces, and they're being rewarded for that. So they kind of really go hard in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely an important moment in women's lives. And so, how did you develop your perimenopause game plan? I mean, I know you said you're in your 11th year of transition, so you are at the last kind of mile, so to speak. But
Oh
how
God, I hope
have
so,
you,
Lydia.
but how have you started this perimenopause game plan? I mean, I know you're a very proactive person. And then how has it evolved over time? What has been your way to like create these game plans for yourself?
Sure, sure. And I think that's the most important question and the most important thing that you're tackling on your website is I think people get frustrated because the experts tell them, what they've learned in the textbook, but they're not giving them applied tactical strategies. And so I've done it all. But the one thing for me, I was a runner. So I I fell into that category of I coped through running. I was
Mhm.
running too much. Not like the major endurance runners, but I was running just about every day, about somewhere between 3 and 4 miles. It was my coping mechanism. It
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily bad for me. But what I found is it wasn't working for me. So I
Mhm.
thought I was already a healthy eater, and I was. And what I found is for what was going on with my physiology, I had to really dial in on the fueling. So for me, what
Mhm.
happened is that my inflammatory state went up. So even though I
Mhm.
was eating healthy meat, healthy animal protein, for me and my physiology, I had to go more plant based. So it doesn't,
Mhm.
not anti meat
Mhm.
or animal protein, but what I learned through the process is I had to go more plant based. So then
Mhm.
I experimented for a year, and when it comes to food, I just want everybody to know you have to experiment. You have to try lots of recipes. You have
Mhm.
to learn kind of the science of cooking, meaning you have to get in there, always have a frozen pizza in the refrigerator in case it like goes to crap. But you've got to give it a try, and you've got to see if you can make it taste good for you. And that's what I did. I am extraordinarily lucky in that my husband is a foodie and he got really into plant-based cooking. And so I didn't have to do it all alone. And as a matter of fact, I would say he cooks for every one meal I cook, he probably cooks 3 meals in our house. So that was the main thing for me. And then the second tier was sleep, definitely, and decreasing my alcohol. So I rarely drink anymore.
So, from what I'm understanding, so you had your five elements of health, and then when you started getting underway in perimenopause, you started to notice changes, and these changes, particular to you, were around that, like you were really tiring yourself out with running, like it just you were using that as a mechanism, but it wasn't really working, and then you experimented a lot with food to like get what felt right for you, and then you double down on the
Mm-hmm.
sleep and then the inflammation part. So the inflammation part you talked about, like reducing that and controlling that, and then one of the things you did for that was like reducing the alcohol. But I want to double down on some of these things. So sleep. From what I've read, sleep is very complicated. And I wanted to know
Yes.
what your strategies were for you. Like, how did you get sleep right, or how are you working on getting sleep as right as possible?
Right. So the only thing that you can do is set yourself up for successful sleep. That's the only thing that a person can do. So you have to know what that is. And really what that is going to bed at a minimum 2 hours after you've eaten so that your body can clean the brain, not clean the gut.
Mm.
You have to, if possible, not have a nightcap because that destroys your quality sleep, even a little bit of alcohol. And you need to not have your phone even in your room. Like there are studies that say even if your phone is in your room and you have it turned off, your mind is still subconsciously thinking about that phone in the room. So your phone needs to be like in another area of the home. Now I have a teenager, so we've always had this like very strict phone rule. So all of our phones we all sleep upstairs, all of our phones are downstairs. And for me, it was really a really good resource if you're kind of nerdy on sleep is Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. And I remember I was on vacation one time and I was reading it. And my job for people is to take kind of the science and apply it. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and make it a path that someone can walk down. So I read that book to
Mm-hmm.
better understand sleep. And then I realized, it is only, are you setting yourself up for success? And sometimes you'll win and sometimes you won't. So my best advice is to figure out what promotes good sleep and then do that most every night that you can control. Like I think about you travel a lot, Lydia. There's like nothing that you can do about changing time zones, right? But you can be cognizant of what time you're going to eat before you go to sleep, and try to re-trick your body. You can stay hydrated. You can not drink alcohol. So what I often say is successful sleep lies in manipulating the other elements to set yourself up for success so that you can get some sleep.
And so when you did this, did you have any kind of obstacles? So like you tried to set yourself up for sleep, but so from what I've read, hot flashes and anxiety and all these
Yeah.
things kind of is what predominantly keeps women awake. And so even though you set yourself up for success for sleep, did you find yourself having to deal with those other things that woke you up? And then what did you do to mitigate and manage those things?
Sure, that's when I really learned that I had to manipulate the other elements. So
Mm.
at the time, my husband was deployed to the Middle East. Like, what do you do about that? am I going to call the DOD and be like, hey, we have a kindergartner and I'm a little tapped out of resources. He can't deploy. Well, that's just dumb. So there's nothing I can do about that. Right. And then I was having night sweats because I was a single parent for 6 months, not knowing where he was most of the time. And so that was increasing my stress level, which would cause me to have night sweats. I didn't have hot flashes. I had night sweats, which you wake up and you're completely drenched and freezing. And then I was coping by running more. Like that's what I was doing. So I was under recovered from sleep. I would wake up, get my daughter to school, and then I would go run, and then I would go to work. And then at night, what would happen is I would drink a beer because I love a hoppy craft brew. And even though it was like 1 or 2 beers, like it was just this vicious cycle. So I decided all of that had to stop because my sleep wasn't going to change until I decrease my inflammatory state. So there's nothing I can do about the deployment except accept it. Like, okay, he's there. He will come back. Like, there's nothing that you can do about that. And then so I decreased my running, started walking, and I accepted that walking was still exercise. If you've ever been a runner, you know, that's a hard thing to like swallow. And then I realized, what was it about the running that I enjoyed? And I realized it was being outside. That is what I enjoyed. I enjoyed being outside. So I could still be outside and walk. And then I just went completely and totally plant-based, like turned that up significantly. And then all of a sudden, I started sleeping better. So like I said, sometimes you have to change the other elements to get to sleep. And I think the thing that frustrates me the most in healthcare and wellness is that people think they can just change their sleep, like that it's a switch. Like if they know the sleep hygiene, then they're going to sleep. But it's not like flossing. It's not like dental hygiene, you know, where if you just floss, you're going to greatly reduce your likelihood of a cavity and gum disease. You have to do things that really you don't even think have to do with sleep in order to set yourself up for successful sleep.
Yeah, so it's like not always intuitive, but it's like a lifestyle kind of change for sleep, and sleep's the bedrock. So I have another question. I know that, so 11 years in, so there's
Yes.
different phases that you've been through, and I'd love to hear what's the phases? Like what have you experienced that's changed over the past decade? And what are you experiencing now that was different than, let's say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago when you started?
That's a good question because it's different for everybody. But
Yeah.
no one talks about like what it has been for them. So if anybody's in it, I just want them to know they do change. Like you may think, oh my God, I'm never getting out of this, but it does change. So in the beginning, before I knew anything, it was horrible sleep, night sweats, incredibly significant hip pain on both sides. That's when I was like, something is weird because like I should not be having like this really, really deep hip pain and musculoskeletal symptoms are sometimes one of the first sign for women that their hormones are shifting. And so it was really, really a lot of hip joint pain on both sides and sinus infections, recurrent sinus infections, and some GI disruptions. And so that was when I was like, I am way too healthy to be this sick. And as a matter of fact, my husband said to me, you're the healthiest, sickest person I know. And that's when I
Mm.
was like, and in a very loving, like Marine Corps way, you know? And he was, and so I was like, okay, it's not just me. Like something is wrong with me. So that was the first season. And then I kind of learned about the elements, tweaked them based
Mhm.
on what would work for me. And then you move into, I would say the thing that got me was this inability to regulate my mood. So I was accustomed to feeling not my best version of myself when I entered the luteal phase, but it was like it was on volume 10. And I had a small
Mm.
child. I mean, she was in elementary school. And like, she's a wonderful human. And she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just doing normal kid stuff that you experiment with. And I remember thinking, Perry, why are you so mad at her? You know? And so I would actually have to leave rooms so I wouldn't yell at her. And I just remember thinking, this is not the mother that I want to be. And so I
Mhm.
changed my system again at that point and
Mhm.
figured out,
Mhm.
okay, what was it that was going to help me regulate that really feeling like I couldn't control that mood. And then I plateaued. And so, like, then I thought, man, I'm killing it. You know, I've figured this out. And so I must be at the end. And I'm not at the end. And I would say this summer, the newest thing was headaches, really, really terrible, debilitating headaches and nausea that I
Mhm.
had when I was pregnant. And so
Mhm.
I knew it was hormone related because I had had those throughout my pregnancy. And so now keep in mind, I
Mhm.
have a teenage daughter and she was just like, what is wrong with you? so, So I adjusted some things. And for me, those two things that I was lucky in that symptom because it reminded me in pregnancy. So I deployed a tactic that I did in pregnancy, which was to
Mhm.
eat more often and
Mhm.
increase my hydration as if I was carrying. And that is what
Mhm.
I have done and it has
Mhm.
greatly reduced those headaches. So right now,
Mhm.
I'm in a new plateau. I'm kind of waiting for a shoe to drop, but
Mhm.
everything seems okay since this summer. And the changes that I feel now are more really like what you read about menopause. You know, the dry skin, the
Mhm.
brittle hair, things of that
Mhm.
nature. So it actually gives me hope, Lydia, that I'm at the end because I am of the opinion that I would rather deal with the consistent symptoms of menopause rather than the inconsistent symptoms of perimenopause. That's kind of where
Mhm.
I am.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Like listening to that, it just makes me feel like it's this big roller coaster and you don't know what's coming up and you're just kind of like rolling with the punches. And, like whatever mitigation strategies worked in one moment, won't work in the next. And you're just, it sounds like you're really like aware. And so it's like, okay, like this is happening and you're reasoning with yourself and you're like, all right, now I need to find a new strategy. And you're like very proactive about it. And so I think that that's kind of really helpful to like as a like an evolving living game plan all the time.
That's what the elements saved me. So had
Mhm.
I am serious about this. I am an educated health practitioner. Had I not learned about the system of elements and that it is a
Mhm.
system and that each
Mhm.
season of our life and each environment of our life, you've got to return to them and change them, that I would be the woman who has had a million procedures to account for really hormonal transition symptoms. And so if
Mm-hmm.
I can convey anything, that is what I want to convey, that we have
Mm-hmm.
learned and understood health in a very linear, static way. And there is
Mm-hmm.
no magic bullet. There is no one thing, but there is a system that you can learn, that everybody knows the elements of the system. You need to eat well. You need to move every day. You need to sleep. You need to not be stressed out, and you need to not be alone. I mean, we are told that all the time. But the hard part is navigating a system that feels overwhelming to you. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what I want people to do. Like, you can do it. You can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the five elements of health seem very reasonable, like you said, the moving, the eating, and all of that. So I wanted to ask you one thing that I know I would love for you to share that. When we spoke about this, you said, I think it's such a shame that men don't experience perimenopause. And I said to you, why? And I would love for you to share that answer.
Yeah. So it goes back to where I've come to the realization that a hormone transition is a midlife health wake up call. It's just an alarm for a woman that says, hey, like, really dive into what you need to be doing so that you can be your best self later in life. And men really don't have that alarm system. So what happens is they usually end up having a heart attack or some sort of event that is really can be catastrophic. Whereas what I'm learning with women is that if we pay attention to our physiology, we are being told to adjust things. And I don't know what the answer for men is, but I am very thankful that my hormonal transition made me dive into my health elements and reevaluate them, because on the outside, anybody would have said, Perry is the healthiest person I know. And I was healthy in the sense of I was doing everything that we're told as a society to do. Unfortunately, I was doing it at the dosage that wasn't right for me in my current physiology.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Perry. And thank you so much for sharing your story and how the five elements of health have been not just your healthy aging protocol, but your Northern Star in perimenopause as you navigated the storm of all of these different hormonal changes. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Oh, you're welcome, Lydia.
This series is meant to capture personal stories of individual healthy aging protocols and is for informational purposes only, and it does not constitute providing medical advice or professional services. Those seeking personal medical advice should consult with a licensed healthcare practitioner.